Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, the big question that's happening is how real is Western alienation? Will the minority government in Ottawa pay any attention to the concerns out here? And are the people in Alberta and Saskatchewan just a bunch of whiners, or do they have some legitimate beefs with the way the federal system is working right now?
Well, it's a hot topic and a timely one, Jim, because this week we've seen a number of the premiers go into Ottawa to meet with the Prime Minister, as happens when there's a post-election period like now, and they've laid out their various asks and grievances, and they've come out in some cases to talk about what happened, and this is what has fed the latest, I think, pronouncements on where we are in terms of the federal-provincial relationships, especially pertaining to Saskatchewan and Alberta.
And, of course, the question being, are they just whining, or is there something real there, and is there something that Ottawa can do about it?
Well, there's something brewing there for sure, and I think there is a strong base of frustration on the part of Alberta, Saskatchewan. They've seen series of laws passed by the previous government, the Liberal government, like Bill C-48, the tanker ban, Bill C-69, which some in Calgary are calling the No More Pipelines Act. And on top of that, the slowness with which the Trans Mountain expansion has been coming to fruition, even though there are work crews out there. They've been working down in the Salt Chuck in Vancouver, the base of Burnaby Mountain for some while through the summer. They're starting to work around suburban Edmonton, where the line will move from the Trans Mountain Terminal in Sherwood Park. But I think until we have the day when actual pipe is being put into the ground, there won't be that sigh of relief that it's really happening. So there are still those saying, till I see it, I'm not sure. So we got that. And then you've got the sense in the international investor community that Canada still hasn't figured out what it wants to do in being an energy supplier to the world. And all of these signals that matter to investors about readiness for investment just aren't there. And that's part of the reason, not the only reason. Oil prices, competition from the U.S., shale, these are factors for sure. But this sits in Alberta and Saskatchewan that self-imposed conditions are limiting Canada's ability to develop its natural resources and get those resources to market. That's creating just lasting frustration.
Well, is the flight of Encana to the U.S. an example of a company that's been in Canada for over 100 years saying you can't make money here, we don't know if it's safe to invest here, we'll go to the U.S. where we know they're energy friendly?
Yeah, they could move their headquarters there and keep the name. They could move their headquarters there, keep the name, and still have people working in Canada. There are different ways this could come about. They've changed their name. The name in Canada comes from Energy for Canada. So at this stage in the game, here's a large publicly traded company. It used to be very lofty in the FP 500. It's still up there, but not as big as it once was. That is so frustrated, I think, by what it's encountered here, and they've said as much, that they have rebranded. So it's something similar to TransCanada Pipeline. They have called themselves TC. It maybe alludes to their long, proud history in Canada, but they had to take Canada out of the name. What does it say when you do that? No one in these companies is ever going to to really come out and say it, because that's not how it works in business communications. But those actions speak volumes. So this frustration that they want to operate in the U.S. and they don't want people to associate them with Canada. It should be the other way around. We should be out there internationally, and people see Canada. Yeah, that's who we want to work with, because we have such a great story in terms of what the investment world calls ESG. That's environment, society, and governance. We really knock it out of the park. Not in every sense. There's work to be done. A lot of work. But nevertheless, internationally, our story scrubs up rather well. But it doesn't feel that way. And again, that's more of the frustration. And so when the premiers, Premier Moe, Premier Kenney, came out of their meetings with the PM this week, when we saw the comments from the Bloc leader, that adds to the sense of frustration, I think, that none of these conditions have been acknowledged. It's really just denied. They're told, oh, those aren't real problems. You're making it up. I think that's an invitation to see the flames of separatism, which I deplore. No support for that, but it has to be acknowledged they exist. If you want to see them grow, continue to cause frustration for the Western leadership. That's the way to do it, and that seems to be the current approach. We don't care. We're not interested in what you have to say. Go away.
Well, is there a good chance that because Alberta and Saskatchewan voted Conservative, the Liberals will actually punish those provinces for doing it?
Well, I think in the long term, that approach in life, in politics, is one that has a lot of risks. These are Canadians first. They have the right to vote. They voted to send a message. And if the response of government is to say, we're offended that you dare to use your vote to send us a message, so we are going to destroy your economy to teach you a lesson. Is that how we operate in this country?
Well, Stephen Harper closed the busiest Coast Guard base at Kisilano because they voted Liberal, no doubt, and the first thing the Liberals did was reopen the Kitsilano Coast Guard base. So, yeah, essential services are used as political footballs.
Well, I think there was not that I have a position on whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, but they had a strategy in the Coast Guard business delivery plan that was part of. But I'm not going to die on that hill. I know it was unpopular, but I don't think it was the same as saying to an entire region, we deplore your economic base. We are legislating significantly to prevent you from enjoying that base in future, and we will deplore you if you dare to complain about it. Versus one Coast Guard base, not sure I see those as being, of the same scale. And so I think in Alberta and Saskatchewan, there is a quiet rumbling. There's going to be some loud outbursts, and we'll, have those headline days. But I think what's going on is this sense of, okay, what are the options here? And you hear people more or less thinking aloud about, okay, what if there was an Alberta pension plan pulled out of the Canada pension plan? What if there was change to equalization? Do we control that, or can't we? I think what we'll see is thoughtful people looking at the long term, the big picture, will form their thinking around what those options are. And it's not a good, healthy thing to be preoccupied with, but I think people will be. And yet, at the same time, here's Quebec. We've got the Bloc Québécois leader more or less actively causing insult to the West with his recent statements that, how dare you have an economy that we do not define as green. We will stop you. We will fight you if you do not have what we define as a green economy. That's pretty harsh stuff within a federal context. These premiers have to sit around the same table once a year, and they're always in touch with each other. If they're not able to have a respectful conversation, they can't get anything else done. So everything bogs down. So having a separatist party in Parliament that is ready to say just about anything, not caring about the consequences, it will make it more difficult for the Prime Minister. And, no matter who the PM is, you want them to succeed in keeping the country together. And that should be the number one. We often hear the number one job of the Prime Minister is to do this or do that. Well, in a federal system like we have, I would say the number one job of the Prime Minister is to keep the Federation intact. And that should be a high priority. So we'll see how this unfolds.
Well, the Bloc Québécois says they're against pipelines, but at the same time, they have no problem with Quebec accepting transfer payments. And all that money comes from BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, provinces that don't get any transfer payments. Yeah,
well, you see a creative thinking mode come in there. It's not oil money, it's money from Ottawa. So it's gone through a sort of national money laundry. And by the time it gets to Quebec, to them, they're saying it's not oil money, it's just Ottawa money. I think that's a bit of a game. I think most people would agree it's a game. At the same time, they're building a natural gas corridor inside of Quebec. They don't want to talk about that. They're just doing it. If you took them at their own word, their own rhetoric, you would have to say, well, so much for your green economy, Quebec. You're building the natural gas pipeline. They would have some excuse, I think. Oh, well, it's a Quebec natural gas pipeline. We are virtuous people with lots of hydro and cannot be criticized for anything we do. I was in Montreal on the weekend. I saw a lot of people zooming around in limos and motorcycles. The Trudeau Airport in Montreal. Boy, that's a busy place. Planes from all over the world. They're not coming in on, helium. They're using jet fuel. Cold place, so they burn a lot of natural gas to keep warm. It's tempting to wonder whether they have much self-awareness. I was on a panel on the weekend in an area outside Montreal, and there was a young man at the sound desk I chatted with. I always like to talk to the sound desk because they're your best friend if you're on stage. I always get to know them, and this young fella came up to me afterward. He was French-Canadian, and he said, really appreciated that information. I hadn't heard any of that. I think one thing we have right now, because I was talking about energy there and the future of energy, one thing we have right now is just maybe a lack of a basic set of information that everyone should have and possess to be able to have the kind of conversation, the serious one that's needed to decide what the future is for a huge, sprawling country like ours with all of these regional interests.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cyprus Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cyprus Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cyprusdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, next week you're off to Calgary for an important conference. Can you tell us about it?
Well, one of the aspects of the Alberta economy is its petro-chemical industry under the last provincial government and continuing under the present one. The investment being made in building up the petrochemical side of the energy industry, the oil industry in particular, but tied very much to the gas industry, is finding new products that can be marketed. And everyone is familiar with the gasoline, the diesel, the crude oil. All these exports create a lot of economic activity in Alberta. But you've got this petrochemical side. It's getting a lot of interest. So there's a trade show, convention in Calgary. I'll be speaking to them with some ideas about where we can go in future to develop this side. I was recently meeting with a group in Calgary, the diplomatic representatives from China and Japan And other countries are paying a lot of attention to this because their economies require the feedstock that comes from oil and gas industries around the world. They like to diversify their supply. They don't want to just get things from Saudi Arabia because geopolitics can be unstable, and having a country like Canada that comes into it is really helpful to smooth out the demand and the needs of their economy. So they like to deal with Canada, and we're starting to see more development of that side of the business.
And of course, supplies from Saudi Arabia, the drone attack shows that somebody who puts their minds to it could really shut down their industry in a hurry if they just hit the choke points.
Yeah, it's a reminder of how unstable a region can be.
Now, what else are you going to be doing in Calgary?
Well, the program is also looking at refineries. And one of the things I find when you're in Vancouver is everyone has a view, an opinion on refineries. In most cases, in my experience, it's, hey, why can't we have more refineries so that we can have more gas and our gas prices could go down? And one of the questions I always have is, well, what if we did that? Where would we put another refinery? In your backyard? I think it's nice to talk about. It, not necessarily as easy to bring about if we wanted to do that. So, what they're able to do in Alberta right now, and I went out recently and had a look at some of the refineries, is produce a huge amount of refined products there. But the problem is they need to be able to put them into pipes, make it economic. Right now, it's pretty difficult to get those products to Vancouver where we need them because the pipeline is pretty small. The Trans Mountain expansion will change that to some extent. And so that's a ray of hope. But having the products there that can come down the pipe when needed is I think a key part of what Alberta's doing for the benefit of Southwest BC.
Now the big
we'll be talking about that and some of the global trends on investments into these big plants.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. On Friday, you're going to also have an important little mini debate about resource development and so on. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I'll be meeting with a group called Suits and Boots. They are starting a 15-city tour of Canada where they're encouraging a broad spectrum of views to come in and debate, talk about some of the big issues. And I'll be doing that in Vancouver with an MLA from BC, Ellis Ross, who's a former chief of the Haisla First Nation, and the editor of The Observer online publication, Sandy Garasino, and a friend of mine who writes about energy, Markham Hislop, who's based on Vancouver Island. And we'll be talking about some of these bigger issues. I think there's some areas where we all agree on things, and then there's other areas where probably there's a bit of divergence. So I think it will be a lively noontime conversation. There'll be about 50 people in attendance. I love a small group like that. It's fun experience, especially when you've got people who are on their toes and challenge your ideas.
So where's that taking place?
That's at the Terminal City Club. It's sold out, so there unfortunately no more tickets this time, but if you watch the Suits and Boots website, I know they're promoting this series, and maybe they'll be coming back here. Right now I don't think it's scheduled, but it's a good little organization.
Now, is this an example of so often we hear it's either the environment or it's investment and work? Can we not have a happy place in the middle?
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that we're trying to accomplish here, is to say, look, you can go, and it's so easy with social media nowadays to go into your own little self-designed echo chamber and hear the things you like to hear and filter out the things you don't like to hear, and that's your world. And we've seen what this has done in the U.S., especially. Look at how you've got these political tribes, so to speak, who really just tune each other out completely, and they see the world as a totally different place than their political adversaries do. And that's not a healthy situation. So I think when you can bring to people who can respectfully disagree and engage intelligently in debate and argumentation, that's really healthy. And that's what we're trying to do here.
And then you'll be taking off for London, England. And what's happening there? Stewart, you get around. Your frequent flyer miles must be tremendous.
Yes, and my carbon footprint, I fear. But the event I'm going to in London is hosted at Canada House on Trafalgar Square, and we'll be talking about Canadian LNG as a market entrant into Europe. Right now, all of the LNG that we have been talking about in Canada is headed to Asia. That's what the LNG Canada plant under construction right now up in Kitimat is about. That's what wood fiber LNG in Squamish is about. But there's also a lot of demand in Europe. Countries like Germany, Poland, probably the UK will be looking for diversified supplies of natural gas. Right now they get a lot from Russia. And you want to talk geopolitical risk. Well, case in point right there. So why not have diverse, affordable supplies, particularly from a country like Canada, where our Alberta natural gas and BC natural gas is very clean in the sense of low CO2 and the extraction processes that are as good as it gets in terms of reducing the methane escape. We don't burn off gas like in some other places. They're not allowed to do that here. So we've got a pretty, as natural gas goes, we're as green as it gets here. And so if we can turn that into LNG on the East Coast in Nova Scotia or other places with tidewater access, put it onto ships, and then get it over to where it's needed, because they burn a lot of coal, especially in Poland. Germany is trying to have a stable, greener energy mix. They've had some fits and starts in that. So, how can we be part of the solution they're looking for? So there's lots of interest in it, and I'll be there with a number of experts in LNG from Canada who are going to be talking about it. The goal is to speak with investors and others in public policy based in London who would like to learn more. So I'll be part of this half-day symposium to get the word out about what's happening in Canada.
How do we get BC LNG to Europe?
Well, BC LNG to Europe is not necessarily something that I think will be targeted in the short term. I mean, it could happen, but one of the things about shipping LNG is you want to minimize the amount of time at sea, because every day that a cargo is afloat is a day when its value reduces. So the closer you are, if you're on the east coast of Canada, all you have to do is cross the Atlantic and you're at your market. If you have to go through the Panama, well, that's a much longer journey. So that's why I don't think BC LNG, but BC natural gas that's extracted in northeast BC, that gets into a continental pipeline network and gets out to the east coast, that natural gas could be made into LNG on the east coast for sure, and then could get into the markets in Europe.
And again, attitude has a lot to do with it. And one of the things I'm still wondering is how come in the last 3 years natural gas has become, quote, dirty, when for 30 years before that, governments were trying to get taxi cabs and other people to use natural gas in their cars because it burns so much cleaner than gasoline.
Yeah, well, nothing has changed in the physics or chemistry there. It's all relative. And I think coal has been a big target. And so you have some groups that are moving from coal since Canada's committed to phase out coal. I'm not sure that's actually happening in every part of the country. I don't think it's happening in New Brunswick, but be that as it may, I think there are those who are concerned about environmental issues. A lot of those issues are completely legit. We should be focused on The methane reduction, we should make sure the extraction processes don't harm the water, that the risks of different things happening need to be addressed and minimized. We have great regulations and professionals who do all this, and I think it's a good story. But there's always someone who's going to challenge. And in principle, I don't have a problem with that at all. But I think if it gets to the point where major investment opportunities, where First Nations who are wanting to be part of these so they can achieve economic uplift for their communities, if they are denied these things because we get too far into the weeds on trying to create perfection everywhere, when the rest of the world is nowhere near our standards, I think that's a loss for Canada. So hopefully reasoned minds can prevail and we can get to the finish line with these products, because when we do that, we are lowering the overall greenhouse gas emissions of the world. So you got to think big on a global scale. It's not just all the time about local impacts. There's a balancing act there, and I think we've been pretty good at achieving it, and that's why the LNG Canada project is going ahead, because there's a recognition that where that gas is going to go, they need to have lower emitting sources of energy in their economies in Asia. Those are growing economies. It's where the vast amount of economic growth over the next few decades is going to occur as the populations of countries, including but not limited to China and India, seek to live as we do in places like Canada. So, if they can do that in a way that's cleaner, not as harmful to the environment, then that's a win.
Yeah, I mean, should Canada be making more effort to sell LNG to India, where they've had several alerts and emergencies caused by poor air quality, air so chunky you'll be tempted to breathe it with a fork?
Oh, India is up for it. They very much would like to have Canadian natural gas. Once we see the first major project take off, I'm pretty convinced that India, although it's not part of that initial consortium of importing countries that's part of LNG Canada, we'll see India wanting to get into it too. I was over there recently. It wasn't as bad with the particulates as right now. They've also got the crop burning, or the what's left after they crop the fields, and that causes smog as well. But even without that, the air is not what it should be. They've been trying to bring in natural gas. They gave out gas bottles to pretty much every kitchen in India. They're trying to get people away from burning wood in their kitchens. That's bad for the personal health of the women in those kitchens, and it also adds to the overall particulate load in the general atmosphere in their communities. So they've already identified natural gas as a part of that. And again, as with other countries, Canada is part of de-risking geopolitics. If you can diversify your supply, you're not dependent on one country that will go through different strife at different times. You can have Canada in the mix as a stable, long-term source of what you need.
And also maybe send some Canadian agricultural scientists to them to show that you don't have to burn the remains of your crops every year.
Well, there's already some good relationships there. The work that's been done, a lot of it in Saskatchewan, to develop the pulses, has created a very large market for Canadian agriculture there. So the door has already been opened, and I think relationships are there that could for sure be improved.
Stewart, you're a man of the world.
Yes, I am. This world, for sure.
International man of not so much mystery.
Of no mystery at all, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. You can follow him on Twitter at SJ Muir. His website, resourceworks.com. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Also find us on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.